All right. When Oak first asked me if I could be a presenter, I thought, well, that's great. That's what I live, right? It's what my passion is. And then about 2 weeks afterwards, I found out we were actually expecting our 11th, and these last couple months have been a nightmare. So, as my mom puts it, when I'm pregnant, I'm inward focusing. And it's really hard to deal out here. So I'm going to try to focus out here as much as possible today. But if I start seeming hazy, that's why. So, but it's been a really interesting process these last few months to go through and really analyze how I try to help my children discover their missions. And it has to be through agency, because you only discover your mission from within and in connection with God. You cannot do it with someone else driving it. And as I've been doing this, it's been a very painful experience as I've realized all the things that I don't do to help my children. I'd like to start this. Well, first of all, I did organize my presentation. I organized my presentation on a somewhat, it may seem silly, but I did organize it in a way that's, let's see if I get this right way, the ABCs of success. And the only reason why I did that is because dealing with all my children, I know sometimes the only way to help people remember things is to make it hokey and to make it silly. So we are doing the ABCs of success, and I'm not speaking to you to belittle it, but hopefully to help to ingrain with you 5 things that I feel like are very important in laying a foundation to allowing a home environment where kids can really express themselves. I am so grateful for the presenters who came before. I thought I was going to have to spend a lot of time laying the foundation of why to create an agency education, as well as the benefits of such an environment. And I feel like in particular, Mark Clough, as he introduced that school, I thought, oh, we do a lot of those things. This is exciting. This is what we do at our house. And we actually incorporate some of those things that he said he would add to that school. And my oldest is 17. She has not gone to college yet. So you are dealing with someone who has not actually gone through that stage of the development of her homeschooling. I do homeschool my children, but having had the success that I've seen within our home already, I feel like I have some things that I have learned that hopefully you can take home with you and apply, whether you homeschool or whether you just teach or whether you're a parent that has children in different forms of education. All systems. Okay, so to start with, I just wanted to put up, this is just off of the website for agency-based education. I put it up there just for you to review while I share a few experiences that I have had that really helped to reinforce why I had to use agency education in my home to help my children succeed. I'll put this up here too. They've covered it really well, but you're free to review that as I give you my personal experiences. My first exposure to my first experience when I realized I had to use agency education came at a young age. When my daughter was a young age, she was 5 or 6 at the time. And like any good parent, I saw that she had musical skills and musical abilities and thought, oh, I know how to play the piano, so I will help her play the piano. I know the books, I know the methods. We have a system that will be really great for her. So we sat down and she was very excited. And that excitement lasted about 2 weeks until she realized that I was going to be Hitler mom at the piano, which meant she had to do it my way, my style, and perfect it to my level of satisfaction. She had to practice according to what I thought was best. And that quickly shut down her enthusiasm over the next few months as we struggled through it and tried to make it work. My daughter is not a fighter that's a verbal fighter. She is a passive fighter. And she got silent and more and more silent as the weeks went on until she would not even touch the piano. She did not touch the piano for 5 years. 5 years, and I knew that music was part of her mission, and I thought, what have I done? I begged, I enticed, I did everything I could to help her to eventually learn to really accept that the piano wasn't a really exciting thing, but it was because I had forced her so diligently to do this that I saw that turn off in her. And unfortunately, or fortunately, every single one of my children is the same way. I have no conformers. I have no followers in my family, not one. And that is a struggle at times, and it is a great challenge, but I think that there are certain things you can do. So on the other end, a successful story. A few years after that, we were in our small home in Kearns at the time, and we had different jobs they were responsible for. My oldest was now, I think she was 8. My son that was just younger from her was 7. And someone, because we have a lot of children, even at the time, we were considered an anomaly because we had, I think, 5 kids at the time. And they would bring by bags of clothes and bags of school supplies because obviously you have a lot of children, so you must need things. And so one such deposit they had brought by, at that particular time, they brought flashcards. And they were multiplication flashcards on one side and division on the other side. And as happens usually in my house, if anything sits in one spot for any period of time, it's going to get scattered around and there's a mess. And so their responsibility was to help clean up this front room. Well, as I walked by back and forth, and they were supposed to clean this up, I saw them playing with these cards. And they worked their way back into the corner of the room because they didn't want Mom to see that they were playing and not working. And I'm like, okay, they're playing with flashcards. Is this a bad thing? I don't know if I should stop, and so fortunately at the time I was too busy or too distracted, or I actually had some clue of what I should be doing as a parent, but I let them play. They came out about 2 hours later and said, Mom, I know how to do division. They didn't before then. They knew some elementary ideas of multiplication. They came out and they showed me, look, there's a pattern and there's this side and let me do some of them for you. It was one morning and they learned division because they were exposed to it, they were excited about it, and they learned it. And at that point I thought, wow, there really is something to this. So what I'd like to do now is, over the years I started studying different things that I needed to use in my home. Now, methods and application are very important, but with each one of my children being so different, I could not come up with one system that would work for everyone. I have to operate based on principles in my home and approaches. I have to continually go back to what is my approach to education for my children. I introduced this quite early in my homeschooling. I used to think as a parent that my job was to fill my children's cup with education. I was supposed to pour knowledge into them. I was supposed to just fill it up because they were just ready for me. And since then, I've adopted more of the philosophy that Michelangelo expresses when he refers to sculpting. And my PowerPoint is going to be very visual. I have visual children, so I do these by default. So it's going to be creative and colorful. That's just how I do things. Michelangelo said, every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. That's what our children are. They came with missions. They came with talents. Yes, there are some that need to be developed in order to help them express that. But they have very specific things that they need to do on this earth in order to accomplish that. And I honestly think that if we saw this statue right now, we would be overwhelmed and feel so inadequate. But fortunately, God knows what we're able to comprehend at a time, and He allows us to chisel and expose and allow other mentors to come in and help to chisel through experiences and through trials and help us to unveil this amazing creation that is our children. So I feel like it's very important as you look at the education of your children and you look at programs you have them involved in, am I treating this situation as I'm filling their cup, or am I helping them to discover what's inside of them? So first you need to consider what your role is in your approach, I believe. The second thing that I feel is fundamental to approaching an agency education is what I like to call the core versus the crust principle. This is something that Timothy Clark introduced in an article, Core and Crust Leaderships in the Deseret News, a very short article, very powerful. But he says that when you look at leaders, and I'll apply this to children because I believe I'm raising leaders in my home, that there is a core that is that is their moral character. That is what the core is. The crust is the skills that they use. So that would be math and ABCs, algebra, communication, speech. That is the crust. The core is what governs how they reason, how they do things, the context that Neil Flinders mentioned. If you have weak crust and weak core, he doesn't even address this, you're a couch potato. You have no motivation to do anything and you have no skills, so you sit on the couch. If you have a strong core and a weak crust, you have a nice but a very ineffective leader. And you see this many times, people who want to do something, they want to go forward, they want to do something because they feel that within them, but they have no skills. Skills are very important for them to be able to be effective. We have people in history that have given us great examples of what we have with a weak core and a strong crust. Hitler is just really the all-time, and Stalin, most drastic example of this very talented, very skilled, absolutely rotten core. All right, and then of course what I'm looking for with my children is a strong crust and a strong core. I feel like this is important to address because I feel like so many times when we look at education, we look at skills. That's what we focus on. Well, how can I help my children articulate themselves? How can I help them learn this math fact? How can I help them catch up? How can I help them do this? Are we focused on the core and why they do things? I think that is a fundamental part because when they have that strong core, then they'll be motivated to do what they need to do and seize on the opportunities around them. The next thing I think is important in our approach is what Oliver DeMille calls the genius mentality. The genius mentality is basically that everyone's a genius. Do you really believe that? Do you believe that you are a genius? If you don't believe that you are a genius and you tell your children you believe they're a genius, they will sense the hypocrisy. You need to believe that you are a genius and that they are a genius at something. Everyone has genius capacity. Now, I'm not talking Einstein necessarily. What if they're a genius at serving and a genius at loving, a genius at comforting? There are many types of genius out there, and we need to be able to recognize that that is inherent in each one of our children, which is neat, isn't it? To know that you're not completely, well, you're responsible as a parent, but that they come with this. They come with genius, and they come with this inner statue, like I referred to before. I'd like to address that as a handout that I gave you, and it has 5 major learning styles. I think it's really important to, as we talk about genius, to recognize that there are different ways of learning, and there are different ways to express that genius. And I mentioned some different ways to express genius, but I want to talk about different ways to learn. You're welcome to look at that handout and reflect through I think there's 5 or 6 on there. But I'd like to read a story that Oliver DeMille shared when he was talking about this idea of genius mentality. This is spoken from Oliver DeMille's viewpoint. But I told him exactly what to do, I said slowly, emphatically. I even repeated it, and then had him echo the expectation back to me to make sure he got it. I shook my head in frustration. 4 hours later, and he only did a little bit of it. The more I talked this way, the more I became convinced that my son Ammon had just decided to goof around instead of doing his assignments. Naturally, my emotions started adding to my exasperation. At this point, I began to get cross. If he doesn't finish in the next hour, I'm going to triple his chores this week, I told Rachel. I put a lot of ire in the word triple. Rachel looked at me calmly and asked, "Did you draw him a picture?" "What?" The truth is, I immediately knew what she meant. It hadn't even crossed my mind until she brought it up, but I instantly realized that I was the problem, not my son. Still, I was feeling emotional, so I kept the conversation going. "You know, a picture. He never gets it from words. He's just not auditory." Her relaxed voice calmed me down, and I nodded my head. I know, I just forgot. I was in a hurry. I didn't even think of it. I just told him what I wanted to do, and I had him repeat it back to me. It would have worked with anyone else. I paused and corrected my statement, at least with anyone who is auditory. We both laughed, and I went back to find Ammon and draw a picture of what I wanted him to do. An hour later, he happily brought me his work. I studied it closely. "Well done, son. Excellent, in fact." He smiled broadly. I told Rachel, "It's amazing how well he does when he knows what's expected." We both grinned. Ammon isn't the only one. This is true of pretty much everyone. At the very least, people generally do better when they understand what is wanted than when they have no clue. He goes on to say, every student is different, and individualizing his or her schooling is absolutely vital to great education. But it goes even further. There are several major learning styles, and so this is up here, the quote. And trying to teach a student in a style that he doesn't really understand is a recipe for frustration and often failure. But the failure is the mentor's fault, not the student's. Now I bring this up because I feel like sometimes we give lip service to the idea of genius education. Oh yeah, they're a genius. Oh yeah, they need to learn differently. But you need to learn it my way. I'm going to tell you, and you're going to get it. Because I don't have time to draw pictures for you. I don't have time to jump through the hoops of making it a fantastical experience, as you'll see with the spatial one. I have a son who is very spatial mathematical, and I love it in there. They either want really cool facts or they want really extreme fantasy. And if you put math in those contexts, they learn it. But who wants to take the time to do that? So if we really believe that there's genius mentality, and if we really believe that they're individuals, how are we adapting how we treat them and how we talk to them? Howard Gardner wrote a book called Multiple Intelligences. I think there's several books associated with that is a very in-depth look at the different learning styles. It changed how I looked at my children. The next thing I think is important, first I want to go on. There's this great example in this book. Oops. In Ken Robinson's The Element, if you haven't read that book, it's fantastic. It talks about different examples, and he was referred to before, of different people who have lived their genius and what they're passionate about. And it refers to a young lady. Her name was Jillian. At the age of 6, she was labeled as a problem child in the system. She was distracting the other kids, and at that point, they didn't have ADHD as a label, but they said she's a problem. So her parents took her to the psychologist. They sat there, and the psychologist talked to them for a while. And it says that Jillian was sitting there, And she knew that this man had an influence on where she was going to go. She knew that he could make or break what she was going to do. And he didn't really talk to her, but then at the end, as he was watching her and listening to her parent, he turned to her and he said, "Jillian, you've been very patient, and I thank you for that. But I'm afraid you'll have to be patient for a little longer. I need to speak to your mother privately now. We're going to go out of the room for a few minutes. Don't worry, we won't be very long." Jillian nodded apprehensively, and the two adults left her sitting there on her own. But as she was leaving the room, the psychologist leaned across the desk and turned on the radio. As soon as they were in the corridor just outside the room, the doctor said to Jillian's mother, "Just stand here for a moment and watch what she does." There was a window into the room, and they stood to one side of it where Jillian couldn't see them. Nearly immediately, Jillian was on her feet, moving around the room to the music. The two adults stood watching quietly for a few minutes, transfixed by the girl's grace. Anyone would have noticed that there was something natural, even primal, about Jillian's movements, just as they would have surely caught the expression of utter pleasure on her face. At last, the psychologist turned to Jillian's mother and said, "You know, Mrs. Lynn, Jillian isn't sick. She's a dancer. Take her to a dance school." I love that example because not only did it show the responsibility of a parent in reaching out and finding out what their child's genius was, but it showed what can happen from that. Jillian Lynn went on to be one of the most world-renowned dancers at the Royal Ballet School, and she even helped to choreograph and design Cats and Phantom of the Opera with Andrew Lloyd Webber. She found her genius. Do you think she found a way to express it? I think her parents said, "Oh, dancing is nice. Go do that when you have spare time. We all learn math right now. Math. Let's focus on math." Think of what would have been lost in this world with her gift. So the next thing that I think is important to recognize in our approach, oh, here we go. We'll read this first. This is Jillian Lynn in picture. "We need to evolve a new appreciation of the importance of nurturing human talent, along with an understanding of how talent expresses itself differently in every individual." And this is very important to creating agency education. We need to create environments, and I'll talk about how to do this. We need to make sure that all people have a chance to do what they should be doing to discover the element in themselves. The next thing I can just lightly touch on is to recognize seasons. This is Ecclesiastes 3. You're welcome to read it as it's up there. Let's read the first part. "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven." Now, going through homeschools, we don't really have summer breaks. We have canning seasons, and we have seasons when children are born. And those are our breaks. We also we take December off. I take the whole month of December off because that's a family month. And so we just celebrate December and our time together. And so within those seasons, you need to work with them, not against them. You'll have times when your children are struggling and struggling and struggling. Sometimes they need that break, that time to just discover who they are and try to recognize those and not work against them. You also can seek learning opportunities in everything. If you're there bottling as a family, because that's important for your family's ability to provide for themselves, then let's turn this into mathematics. Let's turn this into science. Why does it seal? How do we do these different things? Working together as a team, there are so many life lessons that can be learned in every season and every opportunity. Okay, so those were approaches. I feel like those approaches are essential as we move forward into actually, now what do we do with trying to create that in our home? Accountability, and this is one thing that Mark Clough brought up with the school that he felt was missing, and I'd be interested to see how their school runs, because that's one thing I've noticed in my home is accountability is essential. You teach accountability first to God, that He is your ultimate mentor, and that they are going to render account at the end of their lives for how they live their lives. They're also accountable to us as parents, as the stewards over them. Agency education, I feel like sometimes maybe is misunderstood, because I feel like sometimes people say, oh, then agency education means just do whatever you want. Go ahead, do your thing, and I'll check in at the end of the day. I'm really grateful for, this is a fantastic book. Neil Flinders didn't pay me to say that. But in this quote here, he says, individuals are not autonomous. They don't function in society just going off and doing their own thing. They are independent, but they have a shared relationship with authority. An individual in this domain accepts and honors the fact that others who may be the teachers are also accountable as individuals to the superior influence of supernatural authority, or to God. We as parents are accountable to God for how we educate our children. And so therefore, our kids are accountable to us how they spend their day. And I'll go into later how we do that in our home. And there are different ways to do that. Work is an essential basic in the home. That has never been optional. Work is a part of life. I included in this packet also an article, just a glimpse of it, family work, spring of 2000 in the BYU magazine. It talks about the benefits that you can get through family work. And I'm just going to read a little part at the end of it. The first part talks about how this woman, who was the oldest of 13 children, they were raised on a farm and they had to work. They had to work on this farm in order to survive. And then she talked about how she thought that was just what everyone did. Then she went to college and she found that it was actually demeaned in all the different circles that she was in, that women, we need to free them from work. We need to free people from work. And I just really thought that this last part of what she said here in the selection I've picked was very powerful. It's halfway through the last paragraph. People who see the value of family work only in terms of the economic value of processes that yield measurable products, washed dishes, baked bread, swept floors, clothed children, miss what some call the indivisible household production that occurs at the same time, which is in fact more important to family building and character development than the economic products. Here lies the real power of family work. Its potential to transform lives, to forge strong families, to build strong communities. It's the power to quietly, effectively urge hearts and minds towards oneness. Work, there are so many, I could go on in a whole presentation about the importance of work. Okay, I don't want to do that yet. But two things I wanted to focus on today. But the benefits of work. Oh, here's 5 of them that I picked. It teaches persistence during hard times. It gives a sense of accomplishment after a job well done. It gives opportunity for healthy feedback and correction. How many kids are afraid of failing today? How many parents are afraid of failing? And that's why they leave their children in public school systems that they aren't happy with. I'm not against the public school system. I feel like it has a place and it definitely needs these modifications that we've been talking about today. But are we so afraid of failure that we don't allow ourselves to get this honest feedback and correction? And that if we can give it to them at a young age, say, hey, you didn't quite do a good job on that one. You've done some, part of it is good, but let's work on the rest of it. It helps teach them to accept that. It also transfers into their study habits. I've seen that with my kids. They learn how to work hard on our 1-acre farm, and they learn how to work hard in their studies, and they know they can do these hard things. It also teaches that accountability that I referred to before. The next part that I feel like is essential in agency education is what I call moral instruction, and then these service opportunities. When I look at this is the core that I was referring to earlier, this moral instruction. I look at clubs, classes, things that my children participate in. I always evaluate, is this helping their core or their crust or both? I always try to seek for things that can do both. They can meet both the needs of their core and their crest. Because when you create a strong core, you create people who have a sense of accountability to society and to God to go and do something to change the world. I gave an example here on the bottom of the handouts of different missions that may resonate with your different children. That this moral instruction will guide them towards. One of the first ones, feed the hungry, liberate the captive, clothe the naked, heal the sick, comfort the lonely, teach the ignorant, create beauty, and preach the gospel. You'll find within each of your children a resonance with one of these things, at least one. I have a daughter who is very passionate about healing the sick and clothing the naked. I have a mother who doesn't even realize that she's living her mission. I don't think she's ever identified as that. But she sews hundreds of blankets. She has sewn hundreds of blankets throughout her life just to give to the poor because she feels passionately that she needs to clothe the naked. She needs to do that. And isn't that beautiful that we can each do it individually in an independent way, but it's neat when it's inspired by this moral obligation. Service opportunities are a way for them to practice and explore what these gifts and what these missions might be. It's so essential. I don't want to go on this for a long time, but I feel like it's so important for our children to have an absolute sense that there is right and wrong in the world. We live in a world of relativism. What's right for you is right for you. What's right for me is right for me. That's not okay. Imagine if Winston Churchill had said, well, what's right for me is right for me, but Hitler, what's right for him is right for him. That's where it goes. If we allow people to embrace that kind of ideology, it's wrong. There is an absolute right and there's an absolute wrong, and our children need to know that. And that is, I think, an essential part of this agency education. I love this quote. It's from Charlotte Mason, who's I don't know if you call her the founder of the Montessori method, but she said this: as soon as the soul spots truth, the soul recognizes it as her first and oldest friend. The repercussions of truth are great. Therefore, we must not neglect to correctly judge what is true and what is not. And I think that's just an essential part of our education of our children, is to expose them to truth. Next, this is kind of wordy. I wasn't sure how to put it better, but to help them find value in their own unique mission. To know that, it's okay if they want to go and perform these amazing piano concertos. That's beautiful. They're beautifying the world. That's fantastic. And as you nurture your friends and as you grow flowers in your garden and share them with people, that is also an incredibly beautiful way to help the world. So I think it's important for them to find value in their unique missions. And then also you want to introduce them to various communication styles. That's the skills I was talking about, is one of these foundational basics of your home. This is really fun to introduce them to different communication styles. You'll often find children think they're just writers, and then you'll put them in a play and they'll find that they love to act and they love to express themselves verbally. There's many different ways you can do this. We do a lot of games. Oh, but that's more application. Anyway, it's really important. And as you go through the different communication styles, just because your child is an auditory learner, don't just say, well, you're an auditory learner. Okay, we'll just do auditory with you your whole life. Don't worry about anything else. It's important for them to have exposure to these other areas. For instance, the reason why is because I don't feel like a person is always exclusively one necessarily. I think they can be a combination of different learning styles. And as they are exposed to different ways of doing things, they go, oh, this feels right. Oh, this is fun. Oh, I could try this. Now, whether they do that or not, they'll find one or two they like, but I think it's valuable to expose them to all of them, because then what if they have a spouse someday who communicates in a different style? Then it helps them to say, oh, well, I validate that. That's a different learning style. How can I communicate with you? And so I feel like it's important for them to find value in their own unique mission, but by teaching them these different communication styles, and then what it does is it allows them to accept other people and their unique missions in their lives. Okay, so this helps them to discover their own potential of different communication, and also helps them to appreciate and work with these other learning styles. And the last thing I think is important, basic in your home, is make clear your family goals and expectations. I think it's interesting, I do this a lot, and that's one thing I've noticed over these past few months, is I have a vision of where I want my family to go. And sometimes I'm the only person that knows what that vision is. And yet, I'm expecting my children to understand what that vision is. So when they come, oh, Mom, this and this and this, and what if I did this? I'm like, oh, no, that doesn't work. Why? And so I do a lot of explanation of why. It's really important to say, well, as a family, and to come to this as a family, I thought we all understood that we didn't stay out later than a certain time. I have teenagers now. And no, apparently that wasn't an understood thing. So it's important to have clear family goals and expectations in your home to make it successful. Because I believe that children, when they're given those parameters, like at that school, I imagine they had rules there. If they know what the parameters are, they can act freely within those without always worrying if they're going to be violating one rule or the other. The next thing, so we had the approach to agency-based education, and then we had the basics that I feel like are important. And for that, the next thing to embrace, if you're going to go along this path, is choice. There are many times where in my faith, we believe that there is God's plan, which is agency, and Satan's plan, which is coercion. And there's many times when I thought, Satan's plan sounds so much better right now. I just want to force my children to do this because that would be so much easier. However, that doesn't work. As I showed an example with my daughter earlier, it really backfires on you. And so you really need to create opportunities for choice. We do that through different homeschooling groups, and there's different classes online. There's charter schools. You have different teachers that are options there. But you really want to provide your children with choice. And I think that when you present something, you kind of have to doctor it up sometimes, honestly. When your child sees math, at first they're not going to say, oh, math, I'm so excited. I want to learn math today. However, if you expose them to games that teach mathematical concepts, then all of a sudden they can fall in love with math. And so I feel like that's my role as an agency-oriented mother, is to provide them with opportunities for this. As you saw this school with all the different places to go, and you're like, well, what about the mentors for this? What about the mentors for this? Ideally, yes, you have mentors. But children will discover a lot on their own if you provide things for them to play with and to do things with. So that's an important thing, is to provide those choice. The next thing that you need to be very mindful of with this is recognize that changes are inevitable. If you are following your own life's mission and your children are going to follow their life's mission, it is going to involve change. You think you're going to start from point A and go to point B, but you don't realize you have to stop by point C, D, E, F, and G on the way to go there. And I'd just like to share a personal example for that. I started off when my children were getting towards to be youth. My daughter was 11 years old. I thought, okay, there are a lot of great youth programs out there. I can find which one works. And each time I started looking to one, I didn't look very far because I felt this from my personal source of truth: don't, nope, stop. And in fact, I heard this distinct, feeling that, I felt this distinct feeling that I need to start my own group, having no background other than my reading and my talking to other people. I felt very underqualified for that, but I knew it was the thing I needed to do. So I spent the next 2 years creating this group that embraced agency education. It provided a format for helping them explore different lenses and having options of choice, and there was still accountability at the end of the day for them to learn with that, and it was going really well. And then all of a sudden I felt that we needed to, well, I felt as a family, we felt like we needed to go to Hungary. Now that was not on my plan, was to move to Hungary as a family. And so as we were looking into those options and realizing this is where we wanted to go, and different factors helped us to go that direction, we were able to do that, and we went to Hungary. And in the process I was saying, well, this is really cool, this is a cultural adventure, and this is what God wants us to do, but why? And there was an experience that I had while we were there. My primary mission is to be the mother of my children right now. I always will be to be the mother of my children. I have other little missions on the side that help me to do that. But one thing we've been praying for years is for our children to have a strong spiritual core. And I had one son that we were really worried about because we knew that he just kind of treated everything lightly. And as we went to Hungary, I still remember distinctly standing in a hallway, free of all the distraction of his friends and everything else that was going on, my son coming up to me and saying, "Mom, for years I've thought to be spiritual was just for babies. It was immature. But now I realize that it was Satan telling me that. And you know what? He's wrong. How much would you pay for that kind of transformation in your child's life?" God knew what I had been praying for years. And that's where my mission took me, was to Hungary. I left all of our community, our home, our friends, everything logical, and we went to Hungary. And even if it was just for that, it was worth it. So your lives will go on different paths as you pursue your missions and pursue this, but be open to that. Your children's stages of development will change, and your methods of achieving your family vision may need to change. That's why you go back to your approach. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Never let a club or a class become the objective. Never let, I mean, college education is definitely important. It's a tool. College education is a tool. It is not their mission. Their mission is to change the part of the world that God sent them to change. That is what we're working towards. And the other things are just tools, so we should never lose sight of that. One thing that's incredibly important is a method that's called stop, start, and continue. For those who are in the Boy Scouts of America, this is something they do frequently, and you basically take an evaluation. Where are we at? What do we want to stop? What do we want to start? And what do we need to continue? It's a simple but powerful step when applied on a weekly or monthly basis that can really help your family stay fine-tuned to what your vision for your family is and really make sure that your children are getting what they need. I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly because this is more the application part, but people inevitably say, well, how do you do it? Okay, daily habits. Vincent van Gogh said, "Great things are done by a series of small things brought together." Your daily habits are what determine how you apply your approach. I heard someone say that one homeschooling day in 10 might be good. The rest are horrible. And that's nice to know, isn't it, as a parent, that you're not expected to be perfect every day. Whether you're homeschooling or whether you're public schooling, just knowing that every day you set up for this is going to work, it may not work. But there are certain habits you can have in place that help increase the success. I like the analogy Stephen Palmer gave. Every snowflake by itself has no weight. But when you combine many snowflakes on a branch, then it can cause the branch to break. That's what daily habits do for us, is they allow us to do that. The first thing is care for the soul. And that's your devotionals. That's however you want to do it with your family, but that is an essential part. Mentor meetings, he talked about mentor accountability. I gave you in your packet, there's a weekly mentor meeting by Oliver DeMille that you can look at. You can also go to Williamsburg Academy. James Ure came up with some weekly accountability meeting sheets that you could fill out. Your child comes to you and says, I'm going to do this, and this is what I'm going to accomplish. And at first, they fail every week at accomplishing it because they're learning how to do it. And so don't give up hope. Keep having them, well, how is it going? And you're their running partner. I love how James here says that. You're not there to dictate what they do. You're their running partner. You meet them like a running partner in the morning. How you doing? How's it going? All right, yeah, what can I do to help you? And then they feel that agency and accountability, like, I really have ownership over this. This is really what I'm doing. I control this. And if you can do that regularly, I've seen great fruits for that. We have forced family fun in our house. That's when we do things together as a family. And I put this in here because I feel like a family environment is very important. And you as a parent do have stewardship to say, nope, you don't have agency right now. We're going to go and we're going to walk to church every week. We do that. My son hates it. We walk together as a family, but he will see back, looking back, I know he will. And he will say, wow, that was a great memory. So you need to decide what's part of your family culture and what is really necessary for them to go and have that personal decision. I'm not going to cover this very much because I talked about it already with the presentation of that. I'm sorry, Sun Valley. I don't remember it. That college, that cool school. We all know. Anyway, time for self-exploration and freedom to fail is very important. Really, I mean, what safer place than to fail? I mean, you don't want them to like never experience failure, then go in the workforce, and all of a sudden the boss says that they're doing something wrong. I mean, think of how debilitating that would be. Allow them to do that. Okay, you want to take a daily home pulse. Okay, is their genius being thwarted? Oliver Donnell said that if your children are acting up, check and see if their genius is being thwarted. I have a son who is very service. That's what he does. He serves. And I've noticed when he doesn't have the opportunity, he gets cranky and starts like getting mean to people, almost like he just can't express it. So if we go and say, what do you want to do? And normally he wants to go serve someone, and I can help him with that. Go ahead and going along with this, if you've ever read the 5 Love Languages books for adults, teens, or kids, it doesn't matter. I'm not a believer that everyone is just one of these love languages, but I mean, it makes a world of difference in a child's day if they're a touch, if they learn love through touch, to go and just put your arm, stroke your arm, on, your hand on their arm as they're sitting there by the computer, say, I love you. It just brightens their day and it fills it. And I have lots of kids. It's overwhelming. I know it is. But there are little ways that you can do these things that really helps them say, wow, I'm valued, and now I have my love cup filled so I can go and I can do what I need to do. The last thing, and just go quickly, exposure to examples. Greatness in others and their missions. In our home, we have art. This is one of my favorite all time. I call it The Mentor. It's actually not its official name. I'm not going to take time to look it up. But it's an amazing picture because I see the tenderness in this man as he's helping this child. And I hope my children see that. And as we talk about it, and they look at mentors in their lives, how are they treating them? Expose them to literature, Joan of Arc and her mission. I mean, who cannot be inspired reading that book and saying, wow, God can direct me just as he did Joan of Arc in day-to-day matters. Very inspiring. Music that surrounds your home. Creating an environment of learning is essential. If you go back and look through, I gave you on a daily schedule, I gave you the Biesinger daily schedule because people sometimes are interested in that. How do you do it? How do you create that time and opportunity for them to learn? And so if you look in that, there are things in our house that we don't have. We don't have a lot of digital distractions in our house, but we create an environment of greatness. The last thing you need to do, and I'll just close on this, is you need to live your own mission. Similar to what I said earlier, that you need to believe that you have a genius or your kids will sense the hypocrisy, you need to realize that you also have a mission. Each one of you does, that you're sent here to do, and it's going to look different from everyone else. Then you need to not hide your frustrations, your mistakes, and your successes, and your vision. Throw that book across the room and say, oh, I hate studying this, and then go pick it up again and read it again. They see that. They see that it's not a walk in the park. They see that someone is doing it. They see your imperfections, think, wow, if mom could do it, I could probably do it too. Because, oh wow, mom needs a lot of help. So it's very important for you to do this. And I'll close with my favorite quote here. This is one of my favorite quotes that I keep on the bottom of my emails because it reminds me. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's what you do for your children when you live your mission. For the people you mentor, is you liberate them and allow them to go and find their own mission. Thank you.